Welcome back to the Bureau. Today we're talking about supergroups, and a supergroup is a musical band that is made up of a bunch of different individuals from other famous bands who come together in a new configuration. You find that a lot in the prog rock music world. Here I have this by Bozzio Levin Stevens. That's Terry Bozzio from Zappa and Missing Persons fame. Tony Levin, who did Peter Gabriel and John Lennon and countless other King Crimson, amazing bass and stick player, and Steve Stevens, who's most known from the Billy Idol family, but has also played with Michael Jackson and won a Grammy. So that's the prog side of things. You will also find supergroups in the pop sphere. Traveling Wilburys would be a good example of a supergroup there. So they tend to be kind of short-lived. It maybe has something to do with the size of the egos, or maybe the fact that their bread and butter gig is a better situation. For whatever the reason, I decided that I wanted to have my own supergroup. And in as much as I do not have players of this caliber on my speed dial, with possible exception of one friend of mine, the way this is going to be achieved is virtually. So back in the 90s and 2000s, you would buy things like this. You can still buy them, but they're no more on a CD or a CD-ROM or CD audio. And they're sample libraries that are made for you to use in your songs and compositions. I made some myself. I may be making others in the future. But what was really cool is that, people of that caliber were going into studios and recording their playing. And that way you could, have somebody that you wouldn't otherwise have as a player to play on your song. And it was great. I bought a lot of them. I used some of them on scores and stuff like that. But, I never got around to using some of the ones like this that I wanted to, but I just never got around to it. So in as much as I'm going to be starting a supergroup, the brief is that I will use these, high-profile players for all the different instrumental roles but one. And so for Music Minus One fans, that's me. Do I belong in a supergroup? Probably not, but it's my supergroup, and so I'm in there. What I'm going to be playing is the next thing to figure out, because it's kind of determined by what I can play and what kind of discs I have and sounds I can use. So when starting a band, I think a good place to start is with the drummer. And I bought two libraries. One was Neil Peart from Rush. The other was Bill Bruford, also from King Crimson and Yes, and many other projects. I used them both, actually, both drummers on a single track that I'll link below. That was, very heavy in the prog thing. So this time around, I decided, maybe I'll see what else I can do. And that kind of only left one option. And that's Siggy, who was the drummer for the Sugar Cubes, which was Björk's old band. Amazing drummer, super funky. So it looks like Siggy's going to get the call. Okay, so let's take keyboards. I've really only got two choices. The first one is this thing called Electronica that I bought a long time ago, which is Greg Hawkes from the Cars and a fellow named Perry Geyer from the band Manufacture. Love the Cars. And so that's a possibility for keyboards. I have to dig into that. And the other one is Matt Fink, who is the keyboard player for The Revolution, which is Prince's band, which I also loved. Two very different things there. So now we see things kind of narrowing down. It's looking like we've got Siggy on the drums. I only have but one bass playing library, and I don't like it. I'm not going to say whose it was, but it's looking like your boy's going to be playing the bass. And then we've got the keyboards. This thing, the Electronica thing, is very much that. It's Greg Hawkes in an Electronica mode, but also with the guy from Manufacture. So it actually veers a little towards industrial. And then I've got Matt Fink, the keyboard player from The Revolution. Now, I think I'm going to be making a choice here, because since Siggy's playing the drums, I know Siggy can play funky. I assume the stuff, I have to listen to it again, on Matt Fink's disc is going to be in the funk mode, in as much as he was with Prince, unless I get a surprise there. I haven't listened to it in ages. So it's looking like Siggy on the drums, me on the bass, and then probably Matt Fink on keyboards. Okay, so let's then take guitars. I would like to play guitar, but I'm playing bass. So I've got 3 guitar libraries. The aforementioned Steve Stevens library. I love Steve. I have one from my friend David Torn. This one was when he was in his Splatter Cell incarnation. Got that one. And then I also have one from Steve Tibbetts, who's a legendary, amazing, kind of evocative, totally unique guitar player. So, like, this is pointing in a funky direction. And while I love all 3 of those guitarists, and they all can be funky, there's no guarantee I'm going to find anything funky on there. So that'll be an interesting challenge to see if I can pick and choose something and then sort of aim it at funk through clever editing and effects, or maybe there is funky stuff on there. Who knows? I'm about to find out. So let's see. That's Siggy on the drums, me on the bass, 3 guitar players. If 38 Special can have 3, so can I, and Matt Fink on the keys. You could have vocals in a supergroup. I'm not going to sing on a supergroup. That's the end of that. So this will be an instrumental situation pointed at funk. And I think that the first order of business will be to pick out, let's say, a bunch of grooves from Siggy. And then I will play, record myself playing some bass along with that. Pick and choose about 4 or 5 grooves, the best of what I play, string them into a track, and then see how I can make the keys and the guitars sit with what I've done. I'm not sure it's going to work, so let's find out. Okay, so here we are in the session, and what I did was listen to a bunch of Siggy's funky stuff, and I promised myself I was going to do 5, but I did 7 loops. So here's a quick sampling of what I've got in there. Okay, so we're in the session, and here you can see the bass grooves that I played along to the drum grooves that I had selected. I wound up making a few more than I should have, but that turned out okay because I actually had made a mistake, and it means that this one here is going to wind up on the funky cutting room floor. I'll explain why in a second, but here are some of the sampling of the bass grooves. And like I said, I was kind of moving fast and usually would have these boxes checked off, which would automatically put the drums into the session tempo. I assumed that Siggy was playing those all at the same beats per minute, but they weren't. So I wound up, at least on 1 or 2 occasions, 7 being one of them, cutting along with a loop that was not properly timed. So that helps me make my decision. I got rid of that one. I got rid of number 5. 4 is also weird because I started it like on the 2. Then I will create a structure, with about 3 of these creating like a rough verse, chorus sort of break section. Before I finalized the structure, I actually made 2 quick sketches just to see if this was kind of going to work. So I took one of the bass grooves and then started adding from the various libraries. So here's one of the grooves, short sketch of it. And here's another one. And it's worth illustrating that kind of one of the things that I thought might be an issue was, there wasn't a ton of actual funky type guitar playing. So I just wanted to show how I took this, which was a loop from Steve Tibbets, and turned it into this, which is a good deal funkier. So basically what happened there was I put it through a pattern gate. So that's chopping up his playing so that you're getting a funky thing. A delay on a pattern gate kind of gives it a little bit of space and also reinforces the rhythm. And then the last thing I did was actually use a wah-wah pedal and just with my mouse, moused in the changes. So not sure how Steve Tibbets would feel about his guitar turning into that, but that's what I did. And now let me take you to the final track. Okay, so here we have the finished track, and it's as promised. It's got my bass, it's got Siggy on the drums. I added some crash cymbals, but it's still Siggy playing it. The keyboards here are all Matt Fink, and you'll hear them as they go by. And then in my guitar trio, we've got anything that says DT is David Torn, SS Steve Stevens, and ST is Steve Tibbets. So here's the track, and then I will mention one or two things on the way out. Here we go. Okay, and before we leave the session, there's just one more thing I wanted to point out, which is another alteration of Steve Tibbets to point more to sort of a funky thing. This is a guitar which I made sound almost like a clav. And the way I did that is similar to the other trick, which is to put a pattern gate on. So if I bypass it, that part sounds like this. And with the pattern gate, sounds like this. And Matt Fink actually played some clav and very well. But I wanted to get some more Steve Tippett in there. Anyway, this is that part in context. So at this point, I always like to ask myself, was the experiment a success? And from the perspective that, I set out to create a supergroup, virtual though it is, and -1 so that I could be in it, using these personality-based sample libraries, the answer is yes, I made something. The piece itself is obviously more subjective. I enjoy it. I think it's cool. I also think it's kind of funny because it brings together a bunch of people who, in all likelihood, will never actually play together in this earth, except for what I've done here. So I get a little bit of a chuckle out of that. At some point, it turned into sort of like a funk supergroup, and you could ask yourself, is this actual funk? I would say kind of no. Is it got elements of funk? The answer, I would say, is yes, but, so let's call it funky. What did I learn? The first thing is, funk versus my own proclivities, where I tend to like things to be maximal. I like a lot of things going on, ear candy. I don't like that term, but it's things in the mix that, reward repeated listening. I kind of like a dense mix. Funk, I tend to think of as more on the minimalist side, but I want to be very clear about that. You can have a lot going on in funk, but you have to be very sensitive to pocket, groove, who's playing what, when, and who's laying out to make space for those other things to happen. So you can have kind of a maximalist funk thing going, but you have to be really, really careful about kind of not stepping on the groove. There's a whole art to that. I don't, do a lot of funk, so mine probably wound up, at least in the bass, which I could control, a bit busier. I learned all of my funk techniques, such as it is, from Rock School, which was a show in the 80s, and there's a hysterical segment with Bootsy Collins, who I adore, demonstrating like how to do funk. And if it's online, I'll link it below. It's amazing. From the perspective of keeping things tight and funky, I probably could have done two things to help that out, and that would have been, more attention to the mix, which I needed more time for, and also more attention to the arrangement, like really making sure that, like, if something doesn't need to do something right then and there, get it out of there. There's one last reason why my thing sort of went more maximal, and that was because, I had this funny idea of having these three guitarists in there, so I kind of, in an effort to kind of put more in and include them all, I probably overdid it a little bit. So the next thing I learned was, the order in which you do things. I very purposefully wanted the bass and drums, because it's the groove, to go down first. But I knew that in doing that, I was kind of limiting things harmonically. So that because the bass is outlining the harmonies, I knew that I was going to have to then find things from the libraries that were in the right key. You can move things somewhat, with pitch correction, but, you move it too much and you start getting artifacts. So in that sense, I took a bit of a risk, kind of not knowing what elements I could have that would fit over what I was doing. I could have, thought of the primary harmonic source as being Matt Fink, picked his stuff first, and then played the bass to that, and then fit the guitars in that way. I chose to do it this way. It worked out that there was plenty of stuff in A, which was what I was working in. Also because my ear detected that Siggy's drums were very carefully tuned, and I was hearing an A kind of ringing out there. So I chose to play it in A, mostly minor, moved it away in what I call the chorus section. Another thing I learned, actually, or I should say was reminded of, was that David Torn, who is a friend of mine, is an absolute master at creating amazing guitar sounds that sound nothing like a guitar by the time he's done with them. So I was glad to have some of that in there. And there was one sound which I didn't use, which I'm going to have to ask him how he did it, because he actually did a sound on that disc where somehow he did it with seems like phase cancellation or something, where it actually sounds like this sound is like going, like boring itself into your head in a wild way. I didn't use it, but like amazing stuff all around. The next thing I learned is that I have a tendency to over record. Like if I want a bass part, sometimes I will record enough bass for like, 2-3 songs worth. And then I've got all this extra bass, which I probably will never return to. So I tried to limit it down. I gave myself, 7 grooves, screwed up a couple of them, knocked it down to 5. So in that sense, you could say, well, it was good you recorded a little more than you needed because you made some mistakes, and it turns out, it was good you had some extra. But in general, I feel like I want to address the way I record guitars and bass. And that's, like I said, I usually kind of get going. I'm having fun. It doesn't cost anything to do another take. And then I've got all this stuff that I kind of got to go through, and it slows me down. So in this case, what I did was I was really meticulous about putting down 7 grooves in the drums, playing along, only allowing myself, I think, like 16 bars worth, going in, grabbing the best bits. And then before I started trying to organize that, just went in there and knocked them all down to like something like 4-bar phrases, so that then I could very easily say, okay, here's part 1, part 2, part 3. It made the organizational aspect of things a lot better. The one thing that you may lose when you're kind of being more constrained that way is sometimes I don't get my best stuff going until I've been, warmed up, playing away, not even thinking about it, and like, let the hands do the walking. And all of a sudden I'm like, well, where did that come from? So that's a kind of thing that comes up with me a lot, the tension between just sort of blasting it out and going back and finding it, which means more time going through it, versus sort of being more orderly up front. The last bit I learned is just on sort of the order of fun. I had a lot of fun making this piece. One, because I do enjoy playing the bass an awful lot. And I also enjoyed, playing the bass along with the guy from the Sugar Cubes. Siggy, probably never going to get to do that in real life, but the guy's amazing. And, your playing comes up when you're playing with somebody who's really good. And like I said, just putting together these people who are unlikely to ever come together, and then hearing it and kind of, making me smile. If this were a real supergroup, I think Steve Tibbetts would be the first person to quit, because I sort of mangled his guitar playing to make it more funky. I believe Steve Tibbetts probably actually does play funky stuff, but for whatever reason, I didn't encounter it on that disc. So it's no slight to him. He's still a massive hero of mine, but he may have taken exception to just how much jiggery pokery I did to his thing to make it sound funky. The last bit is something for me to think of for future videos, which is collaboration virtually is fine. It removes conflict from, actual collaboration. I can do whatever I want to everybody's stuff and nobody's going to stop me. But, you lose something there. Collaboration with real people, it opens you up to having to have a conflict, which I myself don't like. So I tend to wind up doing a lot of things by myself. But when you have the right collaborators, you're here, and then a third thing appears that wouldn't have come about otherwise. So, that creative friction, which, could be uncomfortable, also could produce something of great value. So thank you for listening to Element, which is what I'm calling this now exploded supergroup. Why did I call it that? I saw it on the back of a car yesterday and thought that would make a cool name for a supergroup. Like and subscribe if you're moved to do so, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks so much.